Away from the wind inland, well, we'll see single figures and a few mist and fog patches first thing. North Wales, northwest England, southern Scotland, for example. They'll soon clear away. And then for the vast majority, it's a fine start to the day. Sunny spells once again. Showers will develop a bit more across northern England, North Wales, North Midlands. But away from those showers, it's sunny spells. I think more sunshine compared with Tuesday, and temperatures up into the mid-20s in the south, high teens, low 20s in the north. Clearing skies once again overnight, and with light winds inland, temperatures will fall away once again into the single figures in some shelter spots. Otherwise, we're looking at 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn on Thursday. The Thursday will start off with plenty of fine and bright weather once again. Best of the sunshine in the north and the west. There'll still be one or two showers into the east coast, and again, they'll develop a bit more widely across northern England, the North Midlands and North Wales by the afternoon. But we keep the sunny spells in many places well into the afternoon. A change on the way, though, on Friday and Saturday. The weather turns much more unsettled.
Join my show Firearm, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Firearm.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news from 4 until 6 coming up for you in the next hour. Rory Stewart has criticised the government's foreign aid policy, claiming overseas aid handed out is often wasteful and paternalistic. Rory Stewart is a former Secretary of State at the Foreign Aid Department, so he ought to know, is it time to cut the foreign aid budget and focus the £12 billion we give away every year on our own people? Sometimes it's better to say nothing at all, is it? Advice Meghan Markle might be wishing she'd heeded after being slammed for comments she made comparing herself to Nelson Mandela's freedom fight. She described how a South African actor, told her that when she married Prince Harry, they rejoiced in the streets, just as they'd done when Mandela was freed. We'll look at how mirrored their lives are with the royal commentator Charles Ray. We don't think the comparison will take all that long. And away from the party atmosphere at the Notting Hill Carnival, a wave of crime clouds the event. There's a murder investigation underway, the fatal stabbing of 21-year-old rapper Takaya Nembard. There were 6 other stabbings. The Met Police in total made more than 200 arrests throughout the course of the 3 days, most of them yesterday evening. The former Scotland Yard detective Peter Bleksley will have his say, and he's quite cross. With me for the next 2 hours, the former government minister Norman Baker. But first, the latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. Good afternoon to you. The top stories on GB News. A huge amount of help has been promised, with the Prime Minister saying his successor will provide further support for households struggling through the energy crisis. During a visit to Dorset, Boris Johnson said announcements will be made this week on energy security, including nuclear power. Admitting the country faces tough months ahead, he said the package of measures should offer a sense of hope and perspective.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Well, Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. The Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard the full analysis, which she won't have until and if she wins the vote. Labour says the delay is causing families unnecessary worry. Party chair Annalise Dodds told us Liz Truss needs to act now.
Energy price rises, as you know, they're a big contributor to inflation. If we manage to stop that price rise, that price cap rise going through, then we would be reducing the rate of inflation. That would, for example, get the cost of government borrowing down as well. So it's really important that Truss actually listens to what Labour's calling for and stops flip-flopping about with all these different plans that she seems to be floating, actually gets a grip and says that she'll commit to Labour's plan.
Well, pubs and brewers across the UK are at risk of closure within months amid energy price hikes of 400%. That's according to industry bosses. 6 of the UK's biggest firms have signed an open letter to the government asking for action to avoid irreversible damage to the sector. Some pub owners say they're now struggling to find suppliers who are even willing to power their venues. Meanwhile, the Chancellor will travel to the United States this week to try to find joint solutions for the cost of living crisis. Nadeem Zahawi will meet with government officials and bankers in New York and Washington. The Treasury says he'll push for cooperation on energy security, tackling spiralling prices and economic growth. Here at home, the Met Police says 7 people were stabbed at the Notting Hill Carnival yesterday, including 21-year-old Takayo Nembard, who died from his injuries. A murder inquiry is now underway following the Bristol rapper's death. He was attacked in the Ladbroke Grove area in West London. The Met Police made over 200 arrests at the Carnival over the bank holiday weekend, including 33 for possessing an offensive weapon. BT and Openreach workers are staging fresh strikes over pay as the summer of industrial unrest across the country continues. The Communication Workers Union says 40,000 of its members at BT Group are showing serious determination to get a decent wage rise. General Secretary of the CWU in Lincolnshire and South York, Mark Pastorelli, says the government must get involved in the negotiations.
Got strikes going on all over the country for different reasons. Well, it's for one reason. The reason is money. It's about the cost of living going up. What we need is the government to take action here. Yeah. We need their inputs, but they're not doing anything. I can't see them doing anything at the moment.
International news, and Ukraine says it's taking back territory occupied by Russian forces in several areas of the front line after launching a counter-attack. Ukrainian forces have launched an offensive near Kherson in the south of the country. However, the Kremlin insists the counter-assault has failed. Britain's Ministry of Defence says long-range precision strikes continue to disrupt Russia's resupply efforts. The UN's Secretary-General has warned Pakistan is facing a monsoon on steroids after catastrophic flooding that has killed over 1,100 people so far. Antonio Guterres is urging the world to help now as he launched a $160 million appeal. He said funds raised would provide 5.2 million people with food, water, sanitation and health support. More than 33 million people have been affected by flooding in the country. The direct train service between London and Disneyland Paris will be axed next year. Eurostar announced the route will be suspended from early June, saying it's focusing now on its core routes like those from London to Paris and Brussels. The company added it's still recovering from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and uncertainty over European Union plans to tighten entry rules. That's it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens now. Back to Brazier.
Good afternoon. Thanks for your company. It's 4:07. It's a topic which the candidates to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister in time have so far largely ignored. But today, the question of how and why we spend £12 billion of taxpayers' cash on foreign aid surged up the political agenda. It was the result of an unlikely intervention from the former International Development Secretary, Rory Stewart. He said that substantial portions of overseas aid handed out by the British government were, quote, wasteful and paternalistic. The foreign aid budget's been falling recently, but it still means hundreds of thousands of pounds going to regimes, some of which ally themselves, for instance, with that of Vladimir Putin. Polls show scepticism about the size of the foreign aid budget and the principle of giving away money which could be perhaps sometimes better spent at home. Let's turn to Niall Gardner, who's not at home. He's in Washington. He's a foreign policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation. Niall, welcome to you. There are those who always make the point, and they include some very senior military figures in this country. I'm thinking of Lord Dannatt is one particular example, who say, when asked, why do we spend so much on foreign aid? He replies, it's a vital part of soft power. It has to be spent.
Well, Colin, thanks very much for having me on the show today. And the debate over foreign aid spending is very important on both sides of the Atlantic. And I think naturally, of course, in the United Kingdom, many British voters are upset about the large amounts of taxpayers' money that is sent overseas. In my view, a lot of this money is actually wasted. And I think that Rory Stewart is absolutely right to point out that we need to rethink foreign aid. I don't always agree with Rory on issues, but I do agree with him on this matter. I think a lot of foreign aid assistance would be far better spent on Britain's national security, upon its defence. It cannot be justified, I think, to spend around £12 billion a year on foreign aid. Some of that aid goes to governments across the world who do not support the United Kingdom over its foreign policy. Some of these governments are corrupt. A lot of this money, of course, goes to international organisations like the United Nations, for example. I think that a great deal of foreign aid spending would be far better spent in terms of projecting British hard power, especially British defence. Liz Truss, the leading candidate to become the next Prime Minister, has pledged to increase defence spending to 3%. That's the right approach. You should reallocate a significant amount of foreign aid spending towards defence spending and for the security of the British people.
Niall, there was a very influential book, not influential enough, I think, as it turns out, written a few years ago by Dambusa Moyo called Dead Aid. And it made the point very compellingly, I would say, that actually, as well as all the reasons you give for why foreign aid can sometimes be counterproductive, there's another one. And it's the fact that actually it can turn regimes and countries and the economies that they preside over into basket cases, because you create a dependency culture and you stop trade.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Colin. And I think that foreign aid assistance does build up a dependency culture. It also props up, in many cases, corrupt and inefficient governments. You've seen that across many parts of Africa in terms of foreign aid assistance from European governments over the course of many, many decades. And there's a huge amount of monumental waste of British taxpayer money. It's far better, of course, to trade with countries, to develop economic freedom in these countries rather than give out handouts. I think handouts develops, as you point out rightly, Colin, a very dangerous dependency culture that often benefits the political ruling elites of these countries rather than the people themselves. And I think that free trade is a far better approach than just giving out handouts. And in terms of international development assistance, I do think this is better handled by private companies, by charities, for example. This should not be the role of government, actually. Niall,
it's worth pointing out that even though
should not be handed out like this.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that there's the £12 billion from taxpayers. That doesn't count the money that's given voluntarily to the Oxfams and the Christian Aids of this world. People who choose to give money to those organisations. I just want to briefly and finally, Niall, if we could. I mean, I know you're there in the States, but you are an observer of the British political scene as well. Why is this just not a topic? Why has this not come up? Is it because neither candidate in this contest want to be seen as a leader in waiting of the nasty party?
It's a good question. I think it's a very important issue, actually, foreign aid. With a new British government coming in, likely to be led by Liz Truss, who is a radical Thatcherite politician, I think she has to implement bold solutions here, and she has to significantly cut the foreign aid budget, reallocate that money. This really does matter to the British people. After all, we're talking about large sums of taxpayers' money. There needs to be full accountability from the government. We need to see that money better spent. This is a dangerous world. We need more money spent on defense to stand up against our adversaries, including, of course, the Chinese and then the Russians, the Iranian regime. It's an incredibly dangerous world right now. We need to spend this money where it really matters, and that is upon defending the British people against the myriad threats which they face today.
Niall Gardner at the Heritage Foundation. Niall, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Norman Baker is my studio guest today. Norman, it feels to me, we haven't talked about this in advance, so I don't actually know whether you agree with Niall. I suspect you don't, or whether you'd like to see foreign aid bump back up. I've no idea. But I do suspect you might agree with me when I say this, at least, that there is a disconnect between what a large proportion of the public feel about foreign aid and what policymakers do about it.
I think that's true. And I would also point out that some of the aid we give is in fact linked directly or indirectly to trade. So there is a
increasingly so, in fact,
that comes from the aid. But look, I mean, Rory Stewart's comments are in two parts, in a sense. One is that he's suggesting that what is given out is, his words, wasteful and paternalistic. I think there's probably truth in that matter. But secondly, that doesn't necessarily mean that the aid budget should be cut. It should be handled more accurately. And you started off your questioning, quite rightly, by quoting Lord Dannatt, talking about aid being soft power. We're in a position now where we're talking about global Britain. That's a new buzz phrase which the Conservatives have come up with. And if we mean global Britain, we must be influencing those countries.
But no, soft power comes through lots of things, doesn't it? The English language, pop music, the royal family. We don't have to pay for any of those things.
No, we don't. But it also comes from BBC World Service, of course, which we do pay for. But look, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the dangers, talking about the defence budget, Niall talks about the defence budget, defence of our country partly comes from making sure we don't have unstable regimes who are, for example, harbouring terrorists or other undesirables. We want to make sure we export democracy and human rights. And part of the aid budget goes towards making sure that countries are stable. And if they are stable, then they don't actually end up... That also helps with the immigration.
The problem is there isn't a counterfactual here. So I spent a fair amount of time working in Pakistan after 9/11, and we were and the Americans also, were piling in billions of dollars to stabilise that regime and stop hardline Islamists taking over. Now, we don't know if that money hadn't gone in, whether that might have happened. There's no way of knowing. But we do know this. We do know at the start of this year, Imran Khan, who was still leader at that time of Pakistan, went and met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow and signed a huge trade deal for wheat and other foodstuffs, even as we were effectively going to war with Russia.
Look, I'm agreeing with Rory Stewart that some of the allocation is his word, wasteful and paternalistic. That's true. And if you're asking me to defend every single penny sent in, I'm not going to do it because I can't do it. But I think the concept of using it, if it's done correctly, can actually help not just those countries, but actually help this country by encouraging democracy and human rights across the world, which is in our interest.
Norman, thanks very much indeed. Very different kind of story. What do Meghan Markle and Nelson Mandela have in common? You might have thought very little, but in an interview with the American magazine The Cut, the Duchess of Sussex compared herself to the Nobel Peace Prize winner and first black president of South Africa. On Mandela, Meghan said that while attending the London premiere of The Lion King in 2019, a cast member from South Africa told her, quote, "We rejoiced in the streets, just as they did when Mandela became a free man." Well, at the risk of labouring that comparison, here is the historic moment and speech Nelson Mandela made on the day of his release in Cape Town on the 11th of February 1990.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunity, if needs be. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
Similar to the life and troubles of Meghan Markle, let's ask the former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray. Charles, I think she's lost the plot, hasn't she?
Oh, completely, Colin. I mean, they left this country in January 2020, and throughout that period, they've taken various pot shots at the royal family and everything else, press and everything, and so forth. I mean, yesterday, with this 6,400-word rambling interview in The Cut, she's taken a machine gun and sprayed bullets everywhere. Most of these bullets are just, I mean, lies, complete and utter lies.
Well, Charles, just on the lies, and this is really important because, think of Piers Morgan, lost his job for saying that something similar to that. But she said in this interview that she couldn't stay in Britain because she wouldn't be able to take the kids on the school run. They'd be mobbed by the paparazzi and the British press, which is, well, I'm not going to use the word I want to use. It's inaccurate because Catherine, our future Queen, has been doing exactly that for 2 years.
And also, Colin, there is a rule, an IPSO rule, a press complaints rule, that youngsters are not photographed, not just royal youngsters, any youngsters at school. And the only pictures we see of George, Louis and Charlotte are when they're put out by Catherine herself, usually taken by her, and they're pumped out by the palace as well. So there's no. She said something like she'd have to face a barrage of 40 photographers outside the school. Absolute rubbish. There are no photographers outside the school. And even if there were, there's not a newspaper in this country that would print that sort of picture.
This is not where the matter rests, is it? I mean, 6,000-word interview in The Cut. The worry will have to be if you're in the palace, and I guess they thought she was a breath of fresh air. There are risks. It's worth taking. It's not worked out. It's not. It's been a disaster, right? But they would hope they can draw a line under it, but they can't, because the problem is she derives her fame now from her association with the royal family, and they will milk it. The two of them will milk that until they can milk it no more.
Yes, they will. And this breath of fresh air that I welcomed, like many, many other people, has turned into a real stink bomb. It really is awful. And, the various things that she said in this interview, and she's accused the British press, and I don't mind her accusing the British press because she's always done that, but she's accused them of using the N-word against her own son, Archie. Well, I'm sorry, Meghan, put up or shut up or apologise. Name the person who you claim used the N-word. It's like saying that some member of the royal family used a racist phrase towards her young son. Again, it's absolute rubbish. I mean, she really has got to learn to curb her tongue. Another thing I'd like to make a point of, Colin, as well, is that she's chosen to give this interview now. Now, tomorrow is a very poignant day in the royal calendar. It is the 25th anniversary of the death of Harry's mum. Now, normally around about this time, they sort of go into some sort of purdah. They sort of keep out of the way. I mean, she's just come in and just destroyed that whole thing. I mean, how must Harry be feeling that his mother's memory is going to be overshadowed by his wife and her comments?
Charles, it's worse. I think it's worse than that, actually. I think you undersell it unusually, because if you look at the picture of her, which I don't think we've got necessarily, but the picture of her wearing the black polo neck, these things do not happen by accident, mirrors exactly a very famous picture of Diana, Princess of Wales. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. And I think and God help us all. I mean, this is today. They're due to come over to this country next week. I think it's the week after, the 5th of September. You know, what other weapons has she got in her arsenal that she's going to fire at? And also to turn around and say, Harry told me I've lost my father. That's a disgraceful thing to suggest and say. It's patently, in my view, not true.
Yeah. I don't know what weapons she's got left in her arsenal, but she's been talking out of her arsenal for some time, it will seem to many people. Just for the avoidance of any doubt, I mean, it's worth... we are going to labour the point, because, let's run those pictures. We helpfully cut a sequence of pictures illustrating both the sacrifice of Nelson Mandela, who spent decades in a prison fighting for justice, freedom and democracy in South Africa. And, we're left to wonder, aren't we, Charles, just how many sacrifices a highly paid actress who's married into the royal family in Britain, and whether she ought to be really drawing a comparison between her woes and his woes. And I just look at those pictures and wonder whether really, as you say, not necessarily in control of what she's saying, but this was an interview. If you're going to do an interview, you need to parse your words pretty carefully, and you need to be aware that people will look at those words and think, ludicrous.
Absolutely. She needs a new scriptwriter, Colin, and she needs a new scriptwriter.
Yeah. Charles Ray, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Norman Baker's alongside me. We're accused of overdoing this story sometimes. There's a lot of public interest. This is an institution millions of people in this country care about, and between the two of them, they're doing their best to wound it.
Well, I mean, I went into Harry and Meghan quite detail when I wrote my royal book, and I have to say I came out of it without a huge support base for...
I mean, you're not a fan of the royal family per se, are you? I mean...
Well, not particularly, but I mean, I think that's largely on financial grounds. But in terms of taste, this is pretty poor. I have to say this is not the first time. We had Harry saying he didn't feel safe coming to the UK. This is from the country where he's living in at the moment, where there's gun crime everywhere and people being murdered on the streets day in, day out. And actually come back to Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is one of the great people of the last century because he had 27 years in prison. South Africa could have descended into a complete civil war at that point. And because he handled it in that way, it didn't turn out that way. It turned out to be a peaceful country. He created that himself, really, one man. And the comparison is just absurd between Meghan Markle and Nelson Mandela. Absolutely absurd.
There ought to be, you have, I think I have, I think most of us have that little circuit breaker at the back of our heads thinking, I'm about to make a ludicrous analogy, best not. It just didn't fire.
I think she's believing her own press releases, and I have to say that Harry appears to be following her rather than the other way around. One small detail from this interview on The Cut is that the children are calling them Mama and Papa. Well, that's an Americanism, I'm sorry. Why aren't they called Mum and Dad? This is not happening. It's becoming Meghan's show, not Harry's.
OK, Norman, thanks very much indeed. You're with Colin Brazier. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, the Notting Hill Carnival, an annual Caribbean festival, celebration of Caribbean culture, has taken place in London, West London, since 1966. Was it overshadowed this year? A spate of crime, including the fatal stabbing of a 21-year-old. I'll speak to a former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Blexley, about that. Back in a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Firearm.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Little shy of 28 minutes past 4. Thanks for your company. Scenes of revelry at the Notting Hill Carnival over the last couple of days as over 1 million people mark the Festival of Caribbean Culture that's taken place in London since 1966. Biggest street festival by many measures in Europe. Not for the first time, however, the event was marred by a slew of violent crime, including muggings and sexual assaults. There were ultimately more than 200 arrests and 7 stabbings, and they included the killing of a 21-year-old rapper who died yesterday. Also, footage widely shared on social media of some of the crowded scenes and a bus shelter roof collapsing after a large group of revellers decided that they would place themselves on top of it, resulting in 2 people being injured. There's lots more footage of a much more graphic nature, which we will not be showing you. Joining us now is the former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Blexley. Peter, welcome to you. It's one of those events where, and I've reported on the Notting Hill Carnival before, there's that phrase, the policeman's friend, the rain. It didn't rain. People stayed out till late, and it's the Monday evening which is a particular problem. I don't understand why that is.
This is such a depressingly predictable event, unfortunately. In the lead up to Carnival, all the conversations that I was having with former colleagues and friends were predicting that it would end in bloodshed, violence, and unfortunately the murder of a young man. It always seems to descend into this on the Monday, late at night, because, of course, you've got gangs in northwest London, you've got gangs in West London, and from other parts of the UK. And it seems to me that this is often an opportunity for people to come together and settle some old scores. The bloodshed is prevalent every year, unfortunately. Those commentators that say, you've got to stop it, you've got to cancel the event, are quite frankly wasting their time, because, of course, it's a hugely important cultural event, and it will not be stopped. But as Robert Peel's 9th policing principle said, the effectiveness of police will be judged by the absence of crime and disorder. There was a lot of planning, a lot of great work done by the cops this weekend, but sadly they couldn't stop all of it.
I mean, so what's the answer? More police officers? I mean, Is there an answer? Or do we just have to shrug our shoulders and say there will be fatalities in all likelihood every time you have Notting Hill Carnival?
Well, the Police Federation are rightly enraged today because no less than 34 police officers were injured. Now, the details of those injuries, in terms of how serious they are yet to come out. But there's going to be a lot of cops that were scheduled to go to work today and didn't because of the injuries they suffered. So this is a major issue here on all sides. And whilst there was a lot of planning went into it, once again, we'll hear that phrase, lessons have been learned, but will the learning be applied? Will they do it somewhat differently? Can this, what seems to be intractable problem, be solved?
Is it silly? Nick Ferrari on LBC, he's on LBC, isn't he, Nick Ferrari, was saying this morning, this doesn't happen at Gay Pride. You don't get scores of muggings at Gay Pride. There is a particular problem with this festival, was the argument.
Yes, and he's absolutely right. It does attract a level of violence and criminality that I think no other events do. But of course, some of these other events don't come anywhere near the Notting Hill Carnival in terms of size.
Yeah.
But that aside, it does attract these criminal elements. Credit to the cops. Out of the arrests that were made, over 200 of them, some came from intelligence-led operations. So that means they knew that that person was going to take a weapon. They followed them, they stopped them, they arrested them. All credit for that. But once again, here we are with a tide of blood at Notting Hill.
Norman?
Well, I think it's just very sad, as a matter of fact. Here is a major event of cultural significance with thousands of people behaving themselves.
Many tens of thousands, actually.
Yes, tens of thousands, and enjoying themselves and wanting a happy time. So in a sense, 209 arrests is a small percentage of those who were there. But it's very sad indeed, obviously, when someone dies, and very sad indeed when people end up talking about this sort of event in negative terms rather than celebrating what was, for most people, a happy event.
There have been years when there were more... I mean, I can scarcely believe I'm saying that. There have been years when there were more stabbings and more killings. There was 1976, I think, when more than 100 police officers were hospitalised. So I suppose we have to see it in the round and as part of a continuum. And as you say, Peter, actually, compared to some years, the intelligence-led policing did what it could to prevent a worse death toll or a higher crime figure.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that in terms of trying to solve the crimes now that they've been committed, that's the next best thing to do. Solve the crimes, arrest those people who are responsible for them, charge them and get them in a court of law. I'm hoping that the Westway, where a lot of this disorder happened, it's a major road essentially in West London, had blanket CCTV coverage. If it didn't, that would have been a failure of planning. So there must have been CCTV installed, even only temporarily, say, that would have covered all of this. But the detectives investigating this murder now will have an enormous and challenging job on their hands.
Peter Blexley, as ever, appreciate you coming in. Thanks a lot. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV online and on digital radio. Coming up this afternoon, time for our Speaker's Corner feature. Our studio guest, Norman Baker, has a chance to get something off his chest that's been bothering him, I think. Today, former Government Minister Norman Baker, there he is, on the cost of living crisis. First, let's bring you up to date with latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. The headlines: a huge amount of help has been promised, with the Prime Minister saying his successor will provide further support for households struggling through the energy crisis. During a visit to Dorset, Boris Johnson said announcements will be made this week on energy security, including nuclear power. Admitting the country faces tough months ahead, he said the package of measures should offer a sense of hope and perspective.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have a long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. The Labour Party, though, says the delay is causing families unnecessary worry. But the Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard full analysis, which she won't have until and if she's appointed Prime Minister. As you've been hearing, 7 people were stabbed at the Notting Hill Carnival, including 21-year-old Bristol rapper Takayo Nembhard. He was attacked in the Ladbroke Grove area of West London and died from his injuries. The Metropolitan Police making over 200 arrests at the event over the bank holiday weekend, including 33 for possessing an offensive weapon. Now, the whole of the southwest of England is in drought, we're told, following some of the driest conditions in nearly 90 years. The Environment Agency says Bristol, Somerset, Dorset, South Gloucestershire and parts of Wiltshire have all moved to drought status. That now means 11 of the 14 Environment Agency areas in England are affected. That's your update. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Back to Colin Brazier in just a second.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Firearm.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Time for today's visit to Speaker's Corner. It's our part of the show where we let our studio guests get their views off their chest about a topic about which they are passionate. Today it's the turn of former Government Minister Norman Baker. For the next 2 minutes or so, Norman, the show is yours.
Thank you, Colin. There's no question about what's top of the agenda at the moment. The soaring cost of living, and in particular, the skyrocketing cost of energy. The 80% rise in the misnamed energy cap, which seems to cap nothing, led to understandable blanket media coverage. Although one voice we didn't hear was that of the Energy Minister, Greg Hands, or is it hands off? This really is no time for a paralysed Rip Van Winkle government. Meanwhile, we learn that a quarter of the country plans to turn its heating off during the winter. Already people are boiling kettles at weird hours to maximise use of the off-peak tariff. Understandably, the energy crisis has pushed Ukraine off the front pages, mostly. But in reality, the two issues are very much linked. Vladimir Putin, who expected to be able to take over Ukraine within a week of the invasion, now finds himself bogged down in a sort of World War I stalemate, except without the trenches. With an estimated 80,000 Russian troops dead or injured, and faced with superior US and UK weaponry, he can't make progress. but he dare not pull back. And the Ukrainians, in any case, aren't strong enough to make him retreat very far. So what does Putin do? The answer, for him, is to use gas supplies as a weapon of war to try to divide and destabilize Europe, so that enthusiasm for supporting Ukraine weakens. Some countries are hugely exposed. Latvia gets 100% of its gas from Russia. Finland, which has incensed Russia by applying to join NATO, gets 97%. Now, we in the UK get almost no fossil fuels from Russia, but we cannot be complacent. We have very limited gas storage facilities, and it cannot be assumed that the energy we get from places like France will continue to flow as countries like France face their own energy shortfalls. It's going to be a bleak winter, politically unstable, expensive without precedent, and cold for those who can't afford to turn the heating on. Is there a bright side? Well, at least here in the UK, we won't be living in sub-zero temperatures for months on end without any gas, as I fear may be the likely outcome for the Baltic states when Putin turns off the gas, as he will.
There's a dawning sense that this is the weapon he will use.
Yes.
There's a clip on YouTube, I remember retweeting it on Twitter, of Donald Trump being ridiculed at the UN by a German delegation. He was ridiculing them for their over-dependence on Russian gas. He was right.
Well, on that one, he was right. But then again, even a broken clock's right twice a day.
But it wasn't just Germany, as you make clear. Their over-dependence is actually, compared to, say, some of the Baltic states, limited.
I've got a friend in Holland. I was speaking to her yesterday. And in Holland, they're very green. Huge amount of renewable energy. Her particular village, 80% of the power comes from solar energy. But their bills have doubled. Energy bills have doubled already. Netherlands get 27% of its energy from its gas from Russia. So even countries which are less exposed are now seeing the price increase. I was going to say feeling the heat, but it's not the heat.
No. Front page of the Times today say, you know, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, expected to be her first Chancellor. They're going to do something about this. They're going to be more, I don't know, you're from Aberdeen, there's going to be more North Sea drilling, get that moving quickly. Nothing moves quickly in energy, does it? That's the problem.
You know, that solution, so-called, is wrong on every front. First of all, it takes years to get any oil and gas out of the North Sea if you haven't started already. So it's not a short-term solution. Secondly, can we not just remember climate change? We've had a hugely hot summer. We've got droughts all over the world, forest fires everywhere. We have to get off fossil fuels. And thirdly, it's wrong because actually renewable energy is now so much cheaper. Wind and solar power is coming in far cheaper than other fossil fuels or nuclear. That's where the future has to be.
You're not a fan of nuclear?
Not particularly. I mean, nuclear power...
Because, I mean, there has to be something that provides the base load.
Yes,
doesn't there? I mean,
you do.
Has to be, right?
That's right, Colin. You do the base load. You need something for base load.
Because the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine.
No, that's right. A diversity of energy of renewable sources can get you a long way, but you're right, there needs to be a base load. But nuclear's got its own problems. You think about how long nuclear waste lasts. Thousands of years in some cases. You look what's happening in Ukraine now with this nuclear plant.
But we can't keep doing that. I mean, you know, I remember going to Japan to cover the tsunami there, and the Japanese, after the Fukushima disaster, said no more. They're going back to it. The Germans said we'll cancel our nuclear power programme, and they're now burning more coal.
Well, they are. It's a short-term solution, obviously. But I mean, look, I mean, every power source has got its own problems, but. Nuclear is very safe, except when it's not safe. And when it's not safe, it's deeply unsafe.
OK. Norman, thanks very much indeed. Lots of you getting in touch with thoughts on the foreign aid budget. Graham says nothing should be going abroad while the UK is in this mess. Dave says, I believe we should not provide any direct funds in aid. I'm happy for us to provide aid, but it should be in products and services that are all sourced in the UK. Stephen says, we as a country should no longer be giving out foreign aid. We've done so for decades, and those receiving it have done nothing to improve themselves. The UK must come first. Elizabeth says foreign aid should only be for natural disasters when it is essential. Well, 1 year on from the West's sudden withdrawal from Afghanistan, the world is much less safe, those words in quotes, and authoritarian leaders have been emboldened, a senior military analyst has told us. Colonel Richard Kemp said Joe Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan dented America's standing in the world and is likely to have played a part in Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. But as our security editor Mark White reports, the people of Afghanistan have been hit by a ruinous economic crisis, with around half the population facing the threat of starvation.
12 months on from the chaos and the carnage of a sudden, badly managed withdrawal, Afghanistan has all but disappeared from our nightly news bulletins. Yet right across this country, they're living with the consequences of a decision made a world away in Washington. Here in the capital and elsewhere, the queues at the UN's World Food Programme feeding stations are constant. Afghans who just a year earlier held down respectable jobs, now forced to beg for handouts.
My husband was martyred the day the Taliban came to power a year ago. We had some savings from his service to the Afghan army over the last 15 years. Now all that is finished.
People cannot afford things from my shop now. There's no business for people.
The sanctions have had a huge impact on our businesses. The Afghan assets frozen by America are essential for food security and the value of our currency.
The United Nations has described the situation here as the world's largest humanitarian disaster, with over half the population facing the threat of starvation. It is the outcome many had feared, that they'd warned would follow from the decision by US President Joe Biden to exit Afghanistan 2 decades after coalition forces first entered this country. The Taliban took full advantage, and as they rolled towards and then into the capital, panicked Afghans, many who'd worked for the government and coalition forces, scrambled to get out. At Kabul airport, US, British and other troops tried their best to manage the withdrawal, but increasingly desperate locals broke through the airport's perimeter. In horrifying scenes, some jumped onto one departing US aircraft, only to plunge to their deaths as it gathered speed and took off. As the world watched, President Biden doubled down on his decision to pull out.
I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit.
Just days before the end of the pullout, in the huge sewage canal alongside the airport, where thousands had been queuing, a suicide bomb attack by the Islamic State. 13 members of the US military were among the more than 180 killed. Right across the political spectrum, in the US and beyond, President Biden's handling of the Afghan withdrawal has been widely criticised, branded a low point in America's standing in the world. Many analysts believe it simply emboldened autocrats like Vladimir Putin.
The message that our withdrawal sent to the world, which I believe helped encourage President Putin to invade Ukraine. I think the reduction in US international credibility and reliability, I think, has made the world much, much less safe.
In the years since the pullout, the UK has taken more than 20,000 Afghans as part of the resettlement programme, but many more remain, trapped in country and unable to leave. Throughout Afghanistan, Taliban promises they've changed, that women could continue to work and girls would get a full education, have fallen way short. On the security side, fears remain that extremist groups will continue to take hold here. One Western documentary maker who spent a significant amount of time with the Taliban has documented their continued fight against Islamic State. It's one extremist group he says the Taliban seem determined to confront.
The strong part of the Taliban is actually security. They have been fighting Islamic State for 6 years now. So that's the thing they can do. And they are not doing this to satisfy the Western audiences. They are doing this because they want the Islamic State eliminated in Afghanistan.
But last month's US drone strike, which targeted and killed the al-Qaeda leader in Afghanistan, highlights the continued security concerns here. Ayman al-Zawahiri had been living in a property in Kabul, reportedly owned by a top aide to a Taliban government official. 12 months on from the Western withdrawal here, the Taliban may be celebrating, but the extremist threat remains. The humanitarian crisis is worsening, and the freedoms spoken of by the new government are yet another false promise to the long-suffering people of this beautiful but troubled nation. Mark White, GB News.
Norman Baker is my studio guest today. A year on, what's changed?
It's got worse, I'm afraid, hasn't it? The Taliban are even worse than we thought they'd be. They've gone back in history. The way they treat women in particular is absolutely disgraceful. And you do think all those British lives and American lives which were over there for a decade and a half, people must be thinking what a waste that was, because nothing has been achieved. Temporarily it was, but it's gone backwards now.
I mean, again, we don't have counterfactuals, don't we? We don't know how the world would have looked had we not gone in.
No.
And the idea that George W. Bush could have not done anything in the wake of the attack on 9/11, I mean, that wasn't just, he had to go after the guilty men, and over time, they got them.
Well, they did, but whether or not what we did in Afghanistan was right or wrong is a matter for historians, no doubt. What I would say is that external intervention in Afghanistan, the British in the Victorian times, the Russians, the Americans and British and others subsequently, they've all caught a cold. None of it's worked. And the other thing is there is a direct, this comes out to the foreign aid point actually, there's a direct link between what happens in other countries when they are destabilised and what happens here. Because if you look at the applications for refugee status now to the UK, one of the top 5 countries is Afghanistan. The others include Iraq. They are dysfunctional countries, by and large, who are coming here, with the exception, I think, of one of our European neighbours in Albania.
Yeah, dysfunctional country is one way of putting it. I agree with Mark White. It is an astonishingly beautiful country. I've been there a couple of times. There's a level of casual savagery and violence in Afghanistan, the likes of which I've never seen, and that's got nothing to do with us, it seems to me. Norman, thanks very much indeed. Emails. We haven't been drawing the comparison. Meghan Markle has been drawing comparisons between her wedding and the release of Nelson Mandela. Margaret says, Meghan only had one job: to fit in. This is the requirement for all those brought into the royal family. However, she feels superior, and I believe she thought she was on the same level as the Queen. Once she realised that was never going to happen, she had one almighty strop. Jackie says the Queen must withdraw Harry and Meghan's titles. They're more interested in making money out of their titles than working for it, as the rest of our royals do. And Lee says, I'm South African and was in the country when the wedding took place. I can guarantee that there was absolutely no dancing in the streets in celebration. Norman Baker, we're getting lots of emails in. You've done interviews. I've conducted interviews. You can misspeak. You can choose. You can make the wrong comparison and regret it later. Are we going to give her the benefit of the doubt?
Well, it's not the first offence, is it? That's the problem. I mean, she continually does this, and I think the comparison that was made by one of your people emailing in then about how she saw herself as somehow superior to everybody else and trying to emulate the Queen in some ways, that was spot on. That's exactly how she saw herself. She sees herself as something bigger than she is. And, she's paying the price for that, because actually she's an intelligent woman. And actually some of the things she's said in the past have made some sense. But she's over exit every single time.
I just want a long-term, and this, I think we've got about 20 seconds left, so this may be a rhetorical question. I just wonder whether long-term it matters all that much, because if you think about Diana, who's the 25th anniversary of her death tomorrow, it seemed like a disaster for the institution of monarchy at the time, but actually what it did was create an even more global brand than hitherto perhaps had been the case. That's a rather controversial point. You're not going to get the chance to answer it either. Save it till tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Take away the title, so I agree with that point.
Much more from Norman and me coming up. We're going to take a break now, though.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine afternoon for most of us. Some sunshine out there, but a lot of cloud at the same time, and a few showers in one or two spots. But for most, it's dry and it's fine because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That's where it's sitting. Tightly packed isobars, relatively speaking, further south mean that it is a blustery afternoon, especially around the English Channel coast. But that wind will break up the cloud overnight and we'll see lengthy clear spells. The showers will mostly ease away as well, but one or two could continue to arrive into eastern parts of Yorkshire, eastern parts of Lincolnshire, for example, and temperatures will fall 12 to 14 Celsius for most, but where we get some sheltered spots away from the wind inland, well, we'll see single figures and a few mist and fog patches first thing. North Wales, northwest England, southern Scotland, for example. They'll soon clear away. And then for the vast majority, it's a fine start to the day. Sunny spells once again. Showers will develop a bit more across northern England, North Wales, North Midlands. But away from those showers, it's sunny spells. I think more sunshine compared with Tuesday, and temperatures up into the mid-20s in the south, high teens, low 20s in the north. Clearing skies once again overnight, and with light winds inland, temperatures will fall away once again into the single figures in some shelter spots. Otherwise, we're looking at 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn on Thursday. The Thursday will start off with plenty of fine and bright weather once again. Best of the sunshine in the north and the west. There'll still be one or two showers into the east coast, and again, they'll develop a bit more widely across northern England, the North Midlands and North Wales by the afternoon. But we keep the sunny spells in many places well into the afternoon. A change on the way, though, on Friday and Saturday. The weather turns much more unsettled.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join my show Firearm, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Firearm.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to Brazier. Coming up live at 5, damning comments from the former International Development Secretary Rory Stewart, calling the government's foreign aid policy wasteful and paternalistic. With £12 billion of taxpayers' cash being given away, is it time to stop wasting money and do away with the foreign aid budget? And then probable comparison, but one which the Duchess of Sussex was keen to make. How does Meghan Markle's life mirror that of Nelson Mandela? In an interview with an American magazine, she described how a South African actor told her that when she married Prince Harry, they rejoiced in the streets of South Africa, just as they did when Mandela was freed. We'll look at how closely linked they truly are. Also, find out why millions of pounds is being lost in rural communities because of delays in issuing shotgun licences. The head of Firearms at the British Association for Shooting and Conservation will bring you the answers before 6. With me for the next hour, the former government minister, Norman Baker. But first, the latest news headlines with Polly.
A huge amount of help has been promised, with the Prime Minister saying his successor will provide further support for households struggling through the energy crisis. During a visit to Dorset, Boris Johnson said announcements will be made this week on energy security, including nuclear power. Admitting the country faces tough months ahead, he said the package of measures should offer a sense of hope and perspective.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have a long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Well, Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. The Tory leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard full analysis, which she won't have until and if she wins the vote. Labour says the delay is causing families unnecessary worry. Party chair Annalise Dodds told us Liz Truss needs to act now.
Energy price rises, as you know, they're a big contributor to inflation. If we manage to stop that price rise, that price cap rise going through, then we would be reducing the rate of inflation. That would, for example, get the cost of government borrowing down as well. So it's really important that Truss actually listens to what Labour's calling for and stops flip-flopping about with all these different plans that she seems to be floating, actually gets a grip and says that she'll commit to Labour's plan.
The Metropolitan Police says 7 people were stabbed at the Notting Hill Carnival yesterday, including 21-year-old Takayo Nembhard, who died from his injuries. A murder inquiry is underway following the Bristol rapper's death. He was attacked in the Ladbroke Grove area in West London. Well, in other news today, BT and Openreach workers are staging fresh strikes over pay as the summer of industrial unrest continues across the country. The Communication Workers Union says 40,000 of its members at BT Group are showing serious determination to get a decent wage rise. General Secretary of the CWU in Lincolnshire and South York, Mark Pastorelli, says the government must get involved in the negotiations.
Got strikes going on all over the country for different reasons. Well, it's for one reason. The reason is money. It's about the cost of living going up. What we need is the government to take action here. Yeah. We need their inputs, but they're not doing anything. I can't see them doing anything at the moment.
In news away from home, Ukraine says it's taking back territory occupied by Russian forces in several areas of the front line after launching several counter-attacks. Ukrainian forces have launched an offensive near Kherson in the south of the country. However, the Kremlin insists the counter-assault has failed. The MOD says long-range precision strikes continue to disrupt Russia's resupply efforts. The UN Secretary-General has warned Pakistan is facing a monsoon on steroids after catastrophic flooding that has killed over 1,100 people. Antonio Guterres is urging the world now to help as he launched a $160 million appeal. He said funds raised would provide 5.2 million people with food, water, sanitation and health support. More than 33 million people have been affected by flooding in the country. The direct train service between London and Disneyland Paris will be axed next year. Eurostar announced the route will be suspended from early June, saying it's focusing on its core routes such as London to Paris and Brussels. The company added it is still recovering from the impact of the pandemic and uncertainty over European Union plans to tighten entry rules. That's it. You're with GB News and you're up to date. More news as it happens now. Back to Brazier.
Well, Rory Stewart, the former International Development Secretary, has had some pretty strikingly critical comments about our foreign aid budget. It's less than it was. It's down to about £12 billion now. We'll be reflecting on whether there is scope maybe for cutting it further or whether it plays an important role in extending our soft power across the globe very soon. We'll go back to that story. We're going to start with this one this hour. And it's this. Just when you thought that Meghan Markle couldn't dig herself an even deeper hole, she does exactly that, it seems, by comparing herself to the Nobel Peace Prize winner and first black leader of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. In an interview with the American magazine The Cut, the Duchess of Sussex drew an analogy between the freedom fighter and first black president of South Africa. She said that while attending the London premiere of The Lion King in 2019, a cast member from South Africa told her, "We rejoiced in the streets," just as they did when Mandela became a free man. Well, let's draw that comparison then. This is the historic moment and speech that Nelson Mandela made on the day of his release in Cape Town on the 11th of February, 1990.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunity, if needs be. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
Well, that's Nelson Mandela. Let's talk about Meghan Markle, who likens the reaction to her wedding to his release from imprisonment. He'd been in prison for decades. Let's turn to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, who joins us now from Los Angeles. Paul, is that where you are?
I'm in Los Angeles, yes. I'm a neighbour of the Markles. No, I'm not. I'm miles away, but I'm in Los Angeles. But we feel the Basque warmth that comes from the Sussexes. We're all better for her living here.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the millions in South Africa feel much the same as well, to know that they were dancing in the streets, just as they did when Nelson Mandela was freed. Specific points in the interview raised with this interview in the Cut. She says that one of the reasons they can't be in the UK, her and Harry and the kids, is because if she did the school run, they'd be mobbed by the paparazzi, they'd be mobbed by pesky blighters from your tribe and mine. I wonder how it works in the States. But by the way, it wouldn't be like that in the UK. Kate Middleton takes her kids to school. She isn't mobbed because we have very stringent rules on taking pictures of minors in this country. How would it be in the States? Do you think she does the school run?
I think they probably do the school run. I don't think they're educated at home, so I think they do the school run. I think to expand on that, I think what she's probably referring to is that she'd have to get up an hour earlier to be able to text all the paps to make sure that they're present at the school gates. So it would add an unreasonable amount of time to her schedule to organise that kind of press coverage every day. So I can see it's a totally onerous task. I was going to say, the thing is, the ironic thing about the Mandela comments is that it's actually Harry that sort of got sentenced to lifetime imprisonment there with no hope of parole at the moment. This is the thing. He's the political prisoner in all this. So yes, no, she look, we know that she at least exaggerates on her best day. There's an exaggeration, no self-awareness seemingly, and it's gloriously entertaining. Actually, I mean, it's extraordinary, her view of the world, and the fact that Harry seems to be the only person that isn't Meghan that falls for it. It's just like one by one, every one of her supporters. She had such support in the United States when they got married. She still is very, very famous. Don't get me wrong. She's probably the most famous woman in the world at the moment. But she had
that's the Queen, Paul. Paul, that's the Queen. Just before she, that's still the Queen. I mean, I know Meghan aspires, but
I don't know, social media being what it is. Look, O.J. Simpson's got 900,000 Twitter followers, so it's a very fickle business. Look, I'm not saying Meghan has any power. But gosh, she's jolly famous. I mean, we're not sitting here talking about the Queen, are we? Only in passing. I mean, this is the reality. It's just like, look, we come from a time, I think, when there was morality attached to fame. People could actually be frozen out if perhaps that they trod on toes or they contravened some unwritten law. Now, Meghan is going to be one of the most famous people on earth forever. It's as simple as that. As long as there is social media, Meghan Markle will be absolutely one of the most famous people on earth, and that's what you don't judge fame anymore. You weigh it.
Sadly, I've just got a nagging feeling. You're right, Paul, and in that sense, no simile can be too outrageous for her to liken her life, her wedding, and the reaction to it in South Africa to that, to liken it to the release of Nelson Mandela, who was in prison for decades, and this great symbol of reconciliation. For some people, if a politician said that, I think they'd probably be finished. It would just be so absurd.
Yes, yeah. If you needed to actually, well, that's the interesting thing. I think we should all just keep quiet and hope she eventually goes for some sort of public office where she needs a vote, because that's the only kind of fun we're going to have. The rumor is that she thinks that the Notting Hill Carnival was actually to celebrate the interview. So this is an ongoing problem with the Sussexes. Yeah, I wanted to run for office. I so badly wanted to run for president. It's going to be the greatest day in American history when we see that. But yes, if she ever puts herself up for actual votes, I think she'll find out what her actual weight of her popularity is. But as it stands, she is the ultimate clickbait. She's the human clickbait at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm not oblivious to, and you're definitely not oblivious to, as you mentioned, in all seriousness, the point about her popularity. I know when I talk to my teenage daughters about this, and I just sort of assume, that they see the iniquity and the narcissism of Meghan Markle. Yeah. And they, what, Dad? What? She's quite cool, and so there is a huge intergenerational gulf. For sure. Can I just strike a slightly different note, Paul? And I'd be genuinely curious as to what you make of this. Tomorrow, and I hope it's not excessively tasteless, because it's an authentic question based on a desire to try and understand the long-term future of the royal family. Tomorrow, 25th anniversary of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. At the time, anybody who covered that story, I did. I was in Paris at the time and thought this is a total disaster for the monarchy. This institution is going to struggle to survive this. But actually, long-term, globally, all it did actually was just, it didn't diminish their reputation globally. And I just wonder, actually, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, for all the woes of this relationship with Meghan Markle and Harry, actually, that global brand of the British monarchy actually doesn't suffer as a consequence. Not really.
Not even slightly. No, you're absolutely right. Look, it's a constitutional monarchy. There's a different level of fame to being part of the actual constitution. At some point, the monarch signs laws, etc. As long as that remains so, you'll never, ever get above the power of a nation. If people think it's been diminished, that's up to them. But the point is, a nation having an actual constitutional monarch at its head, that's a different level of fame. You can only... The Sussexes are still picking over a carcass of a relationship they had 2-3 years ago. That's the reality of it. It's like some sort of boyfriend or ex-girlfriend selling stories to the tabloids. Eventually that wanes. The fact is, the royal family have been designed, engineered to stay relevant, if you like. I mean, it's extraordinary. You know, from every decade of the last 100 years, you can see that they've adapted. You know, whether it's the televising the speech, the Christmas Day speech, to how they dealt with the Duke of Windsor, to death of Diana, obviously. They keep. I mean, whoever thought that Charles would ever be able to marry Camilla? And now Camilla's very, very popular. The evidence is the royal family knows how to adapt and how to stay relevant and popular. And like I said, at the very heart of it, it's a constitutional monarchy, and that is you would need billions, and they've only got millions to even begin to compete with the power and the reach of the royal family.
Absolutely fascinating and really quite jolly as well. Paul Dudridge in Los Angeles, thanks very much indeed. Norman Baker alongside me. I mean, I'm not entirely sure Paul was being serious when he said Meghan Markle is more famous than the Queen, but he certainly speaks to a certain view online that she enjoys enormous popularity.
Well, I think she's a great unifier. People in the United States are very pleased that she's there, and people in Britain are very pleased that she's in the United States. So both are happy in that sense. Look, I mean, she's overreached herself on this particular occasion, as she has done on many other occasions, and I think that will do her no good in the longer term. But she's news. I mean, she'll continue to get reported in the papers in this country and the US, and that won't go away.
OK, Norman, for now, thanks very much indeed. Got some technical problems here, which we'll try and overcome. Well, could damning comments by the former International Development Secretary Rory Stewart catapult a largely ignored topic to the top of the political agenda? That topic being how and why the UK government spends £12 billion of taxpayers' cash on foreign aid. Rory Stewart says substantial portions of overseas aid handed out by the British government were, quote, wasteful and paternalistic in his eyes. The problem is that the government gives countries resources that it thinks will be useful rather than just handing out cash that communities can use in whatever way they see fit. Britain currently spends 0.5% of GDP on foreign aid, which came to an estimated £11.5 billion. That was in 2021. That controversially down from 0.7% after a vote in the House of Commons last year, which saw a number of Tory MPs revolt against the government. But if, like Rory Stewart says, money's being wasted, is it time perhaps that foreign aid budget was pared further? We will reflect on that story very soon. We're going to go to a break now.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine afternoon for most of us. Some sunshine out there, but a lot of cloud at the same time, and a few showers in one or two spots. But for most, it's dry and it's fine because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That's where it's sitting. Tightly packed isobars, relatively speaking, further south mean that it is a blustery afternoon, especially around the English Channel coast. But that wind will break up the cloud overnight and we'll see lengthy clear spells. The showers will mostly ease away as well, but one or two could continue to arrive into eastern parts of Yorkshire, eastern parts of Lincolnshire, for example, and temperatures will fall 12 to 14 Celsius for most, but where we get some sheltered spots away from the wind inland, well, we'll see single figures and a few mist and fog patches first thing. North Wales, northwest England, southern Scotland, for example. They'll soon clear away. And then for the vast majority, it's a fine start to the day. Sunny spells once again. Showers will develop a bit more across northern England, North Wales, North Midlands. But away from those showers, it's sunny spells. I think more sunshine compared with Tuesday, and temperatures up into the mid-20s in the south, high teens, low 20s in the north. Clearing skies once again overnight, and with light winds inland, temperatures will fall away once again into the single figures in some sheltered spots. Otherwise, we're looking at 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn on Thursday. The Thursday will start off with plenty of fine and bright weather once again. Best of the sunshine in the north and the west. There'll still be one or two showers into the east coast, and again, they'll develop a bit more widely across northern England, the North Midlands and North Wales by the afternoon. But we keep the sunny spells in many places well into the afternoon. A change on the way, though, on Friday and Saturday. The weather turns much more unsettled.
Join my show Firearm, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Firearm.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. We've fixed the problem. And lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on Meghan Markle, drawing a comparison, it seems, in an interview that she gave with an American magazine. The reaction, she said, well, she likened the reaction to her wedding to Prince Harry to that which met the release of Nelson Mandela, who'd been in prison for decades. Quite a stretch in the minds of many. Dave says, does Meghan not have advisors to guide her and explain how she's making herself look ridiculous? Rob says, how dare she think up a sentence likening herself to Nelson Mandela, someone who actually did a massive amount of good in this world? Chris said, gutter standards would be too kind for the endless abhorrent attacks inflicted on Harry and Meghan by journalists. End of. Leave them alone. Tim says, leave her and Harry in America and we don't want them back in our country. Over 1 million people flocked to Notting Hill in London over the last couple of days, marking the Carnival of Caribbean culture, the Notting Hill Carnival. It's taken place in the capital since before 1966, I think. No, 1966, that was the first year. But not for the first time. It was blighted to some degree by serious crime, the muggings, some sexual assaults, more than 200 arrests in total. And not for the first time, it was the last night which saw a crescendo of violence. There were 7 stabbings in the last few hours of yesterday, and one 21-year-old rapper from Bristol was stabbed to death. Circumstances of that attack not clear, as you'd expect at this stage. Also, footage widely shared on social media of a bus shelter roof collapsing. Large group had climbed on top of it, resulting in 2 people being injured. Ken Hines is the chair of Haringey Stop and Search Group. He's also part of Rough Diamond, organises events at carnivals. He's here in the studio. Ken, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Compared to some years, this was not blighted by crime. There have been worse years when it comes to stabbings and muggings and all the rest of it. And this is uncancelable. We get that. The Notting Hill Carnival is a punctuation mark in our annual calendar. But there are that people rejoice in. But the people are worried too when they see the inevitability of serious crime. What do you say to them?
First of all, I want to send my condolence out to the family of the young man who lost his life tragically on an amazing kind of event. This is the pinnacle. I call it my Olympics. So I train all year just for that, for the Notting Hill Carnival, and then to see it being the headline is being about the violence rather than about the beauty of the costume, about the diversity, about the positive spirits that was generally that marked both days. It's to me, it's unfortunate.
Just as a journalist, I'll come back on that because I think it's a really interesting point. I mean, sadly, it's never news when a plane lands safely. It's only news when a plane crashes. And in the same way, if we didn't cover the violence, if we didn't cover a fatal stabbing and said, oh, look at these fantastic pictures of people who've put wonderful sequin costumes on, people would be left scratching their heads saying, well, hang on, you're glossing over something very serious, namely a killing. So we have to reflect that. And maybe we're not reflecting it in as balanced a way as you would like.
I understand, but the balance also comes for 6 months. The work that goes on behind the scene. I've been involved in the Carnival for 20 years, of people who, what we do, we're building communities, stronger communities outside the Carnival, because the legacy it leaves with the people that have been part of that kind of community village, it goes on for a lifetime. They become friends. So when these things happen, my thing is simply that we need to do something different. And the things that we need to do different, we can't just leave it down to the policing. We can't blame the police for anything that does go on there, because
nobody's blaming the police for what happened.
And it shouldn't be, because I saw some really challenging police moments where they stepped in to stop fights, and then some of the young men want to turn on the police. And I've stepped in.
Yesterday?
Yesterday.
What happened? That's what you saw?
Well, what it was, there were a group of guys fighting, and the police were walking by, and they stepped in and they de-escalated it. The next thing, one group turned on the police to then wanted to go and get aggressive on the police, and I stepped in and I said, listen, we're not of that life. This event is not about that. Come on, we've got families here. Because I was with two young girls, teenage girl, my nieces, and they didn't want to see that kind of violence, but I felt I had to step in, because that's what my role is outside the community, is about keeping the peace or making the peace.
Norman Baker.
Well, I think Ken's response was brilliant, to be perfectly honest with you. It is a popular event. It's a very important event in the calendar. It's an event where people can come together to celebrate, and something good can come out of it. And it is a tragedy, actually, that we end up talking about the negatives, because the negatives are only a small part of what happened, and it was largely positive. And your comparison about a plane landing safely and not landing safely is absolutely right, Colin. That is how the news works. And I sometimes think people get an impression of the world, which is the news is terrible, it's all very destructive. Actually, a huge number of good things happen in the world, but they don't make news.
Look, if it was somewhere where you were going to be caught up in trouble all the time, hundreds of thousands of people, some of them from abroad, wouldn't descend on Notting Hill in the way they do. But I just wonder, if I was taking my kids, if I'd been in your situation, Ken, with teenage daughters yesterday, I would have been glad to have been gone by dusk, because there does seem to be a problem on that last night.
There is, and for years we have been complaining for there to be a better way of ending the carnival, and how they used to end the carnival back in the days. They used to allow the floats to play the music for half a mile or a mile outside of the carnival route. What that tend to take troves of people out in a civilized way. But once the music is cut off and people just wander around aimlessly, that's a bad recipe with people who have had too much alcohol, probably drugs involved, and there's a high spirit going on. It's not a good way of finishing things. Now, my thing is just because we've got weak organisers who are leading this. We need to, and don't get me wrong, the police and the authority wants to do the right thing, but they don't understand the nature of the beast. And the nature of the beast is that simply that people have come up, they'd have a good time. We have to end it right. You've got to allow these floats to take people out in an organised manner. Don't stop at the top of the Ladbroke Grove, and people are backing off, because people just come back into the carnival footprint. We want people going safely off the carnival footprint in an organised and a good way, in a good manner, in that way.
I mean, the danger is, nothing's more likely to spark trouble than the police saying, guys, we know you've been having a great time, and now it's come to an end. So it is managing that situation. I spare a thought for the cops and indeed the paramedics who yesterday had to fight their way through to get to this 21-year-old who was bleeding to death. We spare a thought for all those people, don't we? Ken Hines, really appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts and your opinions. Thanks a lot. Back to our discussion on whether the government's foreign aid budget should be reflected upon. Rory Stewart's been reflecting on it. He says substantial portions of overseas aid handed out by the British taxpayer were, as he put it, wasteful and paternalistic. He ought to know. He's a former Secretary of State for the Department for Foreign Aid. Is it time then to maybe think about cutting that budget more to fund projects here at home? We faced a cost of living crisis, as we know. Stepanenko is a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society to ponder on this one. Stepan, welcome to you. It's been cut from 0.7% to 0.5% of GDP, which in terms that people can understand means we're still paying £12 billion a year. What would you do with it?
Hello. Rory Stewart's quite right that perhaps it's not being spent in the right way. Now, his idea of giving it to people directly rather than having Western organizations think of best ways to help them does help, but it gives them the fish. It doesn't give them the fishing rod. Perhaps it may be a better way to get Western British investment companies and direct the money into private businesses that won't only give the fish and the fishing rod, but the fishing market afterwards to sell the fish onto. And we have those. The British International Investment Organization is state-run, and funding can go through that. It's a viable way to support social enterprises, which we have in Britain. Things like the Big Issue, things like the Co-op, after all. They're all social enterprises, and they help the community in one way or another.
Stefan, I remember talking a few years ago to somebody who worked for an NGO, and they were saying, you know what, around about this time of the year, the end of the financial year for the Department for International Development, they're worried about the fact they might be left with money they've not spent. And this particular individual I knew was involved in training, media training as it's known, and they said, we always get lots of great contracts at this time of the year. And there was a sense in which if you say, we're going to give you 0.7% of GDP, it's in the nature of things. That to keep that up, you've got to spend up to that amount. And that leads to dreadful waste and corruption, because by that stage, towards the end of the financial year, you're throwing your money at anyone and anything, even media training.
That is true, and perhaps there is an argument for better management. Indeed, if it was to go through private institutions which are market-orientated, and earlier on in the financial year, it will be perhaps a way towards making it clearer and more transparent so people can know why their pounds that they're paying in tax in London, in Wolverhampton, in Britain, go towards something in Sierra Leone, for instance, a country that is in the Commonwealth, but unfortunately has been abandoned by Britain by all accounts, as, for instance, our trade with the country is a third of the amount that the Sierra Leone's buy rice from China for. So there are elements that can be developed, and management is one of them.
Stepan Stepanenko is a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Thanks for your time. Coming up, find out why millions of pounds is being wasted, lost in rural communities because of delays in the issuance of shotgun licences, and why the Great British Brew, the cuppa, could save, well, maybe not save your life, but not do it any harm. The managing director of Tregothnan Tea will have his say. First, the latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. A huge amount of help has been promised with the energy crisis, with the Prime Minister saying his successor will provide further support for households that are struggling. During a visit to Dorset, Boris Johnson said announcements will be made this week on energy security, including nuclear power. Admitting the country faced tough months ahead, he said the package of measures should offer a sense of hope and perspective.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Meanwhile, Liz Truss's team says she won't finalise plans to manage the rising cost of living until she becomes Prime Minister. But Labour says the delay is causing families unnecessary worry. The leadership contender wants to hold off until she's heard full advice from Whitehall, which she won't have until and if she's elected PM. As you've been hearing, 7 people were stabbed at the Notting Hill Carnival yesterday, including 21-year-old Bristol rapper Takayo Nembard, who died from his injuries. The Metropolitan Police made over 200 arrests at the event over the bank holiday weekend, including 33 for possessing an offensive weapon. The whole of the southwest of England is now officially in drought, following some of the driest conditions in nearly 90 years. The Environment Agency says Bristol, Somerset, Dorset, South Gloucestershire and parts of Wiltshire have all moved to drought status. It now means 11 of the 14 Environment Agency areas in England are now affected. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, and we'll have the finance news for you coming up.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here it is then. The pound will buy you $1.166 and €1.163. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,479.86 an ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, investments that matter.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Firearm.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Leaders from half a dozen of Britain's largest breweries have called for immediate government intervention. This in an open letter to the government as publicans' energy costs soar by as much as 300%. The number of pubs in England and Wales, it's already fallen to the lowest level on record. Industry bosses warning up to three quarters of pubs in the UK could be forced to close this winter. Rising bills threatening locals, but the government has announced that no policy will be announced until there is a new Prime Minister on the 5th of September. Heath Ball owns several pubs, joins me now. Welcome to you. Numerous debates on this news channel about the virtues of the pub. I'm a great fan. You're a great fan. I'm sure Norman Baker, my guest today, is too. How to keep them alive?
Man, we've come out of the lockdowns and then we suddenly find ourselves limping all the way to summer. And we get through summer and it's not great. We're not in great shape because all the costs have gone up. And now we're looking at winter and I'm looking at costs. I think my electricity bill is going to be £50,000 more than it was last year.
Wow.
So even if I was working on 10% EBITDA, I need to generate £500,000 net before, after paying the government their money to keep the lights on. How is that possible?
And there's not really any way you can change things or moderate things. I mean, we the public can maybe switch the thermostat down a little bit. Yes, we can. We can put on an extra sweater. You go to your local and find it chilly, you're just going to turn on your heel and walk away.
Of course you are. And we've got equipment like the extraction we use in the kitchen. When we're cooking, that needs to be on, and that draws a lot of energy. So what do? You cut back your opening hours. You close some days. But you cut back. And what are you left with? Nothing. We're not making money now. We've been hammered by the cost of living crisis, and now electricity and gas are killing us. If the government wants any pubs left in this country, they need to step up. Well, we need a government in place to step up, and we don't have a government in place. I don't know. We're really on our own.
Yeah,
we can write letters. We can say what we want, but
I mean, just on that question, does the government? I mean, there'll be some people who say this has got nothing to do with government. If private businesses go under because their business model and the world that feeds into that business model has changed. I'm not one of them, by the way. I think the pubs are a fantastic school for teaching people how to drink. They're great community focal hubs and all the rest of it. But there are lots of people
who say that are naive. We are the biggest. You think how much tax we collect for the Treasury? Yep. We're at point of sale, 20%, straight away, straight to the Treasury. And then you've got beer duty, you've got everything else we do. We employ the third biggest employer in the country. So if they don't want pubs anymore, carry on doing what they're doing. But there's going to be none left. And they're all going to, and the ones that are going to be left are going to be rubbish. There's going to be nothing left. Yeah. So they need to step up and realise that business is important. It's not just us, it's every business.
Yeah. Heath Ball, it's a sorry state, but hopefully come September the 5th, we'll get some news from this government. And, we're talking we're talking right now today. Our lead story is reflecting on the 12 billion quid we give away in foreign aid every year. And it's a question of priorities, isn't it? And, will the government prioritise state aid, taxpayers' money to support the great British boozer? I think a lot of us hope so. Heath Ball, thanks very much indeed. And good luck.
So do I.
Norman Baker's alongside me. Does the British government and the British taxpayer have a moral duty to support the pub?
The pub is an essential part of our communities, you've just said yourself, Colin, and as you just heard from Heath Ball, it produces a great deal of money for the taxpayer in terms of income for the Treasury. So even on that narrow field, it makes some sense to keep the pub going. But this is terrible. It sounds like time, gentlemen, please, from what we've heard there from Heath Ball. And people have to realise, I think, and perhaps they don't realise, but they don't run a business themselves, that, OK, all of us are seeing our energy bills rising, but there is a kind of limit to how far they rise, imposed by the so-called cap. There's no such cap for business. They can go up endlessly, the energy costs in our businesses. It's not simply the pubs, it's the small shops, the corner shops. Yeah. The whole of our community is going to be destroyed unless action is taken to reduce energy costs.
Norman, thanks very much indeed. Let's reflect on a different story. A warning that paperwork delays by firearms licensing units, they're part of police forces, are damaging the pastimes of legitimate recreational shooters. and costing the rural economy millions of pounds as a consequence. The British Association of Shooting and Conservation says delays and increased costs of issuing these licences are hitting rural communities that depend on shooting, especially from this time of the year onwards through the winter, really, really hard. The head of Firearms at the British Association for Shooting and Conservation is Martin Parker, who joins us now. Martin, welcome to you. For people not familiar with this system, it's down to each individual police force, is it?
Yes. So in England and Wales, the 43 different forces each administer their firearms licensing in, I'm afraid, different ways.
And there's a cost of administering that, because obviously, the police force wants to be sure that somebody who applies for a shotgun or a rifle license, a firearms license, is a fit and proper person to have something as potentially lethal as that. So they're going to do things like write to the GP.
That's right. Every applicant now, be it a renewal of their firearm certificate or if they're applying for a new firearm certificate, they have to actually get what's called a GP verification. So you make a declaration and your GP actually verifies that what you've said is correct. But there are a lot of other checks, sort of criminal record checks, things like that. So we have some of the strictest licensing system in the world. So we're pretty good when it comes to public safety.
And how does this knock on to costing money for rural communities? Because presumably if the licence doesn't get issued, people can't travel with their firearms or shotguns, and they can't use them on sporting days and stay in the hotels and all the rest of it.
Well, the problem that you've got at the moment, I've just done a review of sort of firearms licensing in England and Wales, and probably about 30% of the forces are actually performing very well and did over COVID. But it's a postcode lottery. So if I apply in one of the good forces and there are no problems, I should be able to get back my certificate within sort of a couple of months, as I say, assuming I'm a fit person. But if you're looking at forces at the other end of the scale, I could wait well over a year before my firearm or shotgun certificate's issued.
Wow.
And the knock-on effect of that, obviously the new people coming into the sport, they're the ones who are buying new weapons, but it's not just the firearms that they're buying and the ammunition. There are all the associated things. So there's gun dog training, there are people who are buying specialist clothing, they're buying optical equipment. So that has a real knock-on effect sort of directly with gun shops and that. But in terms of the rural community, that then goes wider in the fact that if people are going to shoot, they'll stay in hotels. I mean, your article just on about the local pubs, they'll be visiting the local pubs. If they can't shoot because they don't have a certificate, they won't be doing that.
Martin Parker is the head of Firearms at the British Association for Shooting and Conservation. Martin, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Norman Baker, alongside my former government minister, including responsibility for this?
Yes, it came within my portfolio at the Home Office, and it's quite right. We have some of the strictest controls in the world, and I think that's absolutely right. I think we should be proud of that. But, we have a duty as well to the taxpayer to make sure that the money which is charged covers the cost of administration. But we also have a duty to make sure that applications are processed properly and quickly, and the delays which I've just heard about are not acceptable. So that's the kind of deal we have to come to. You cover the cost of the police activity quite properly if you're a gun owner applying for a licence, and in return, your application is processed quickly and effectively.
OK, Norman, for now, thanks very much indeed. Lots of you getting in touch on the question of foreign aid, if you're just tuning in. Rory Stewart, former Secretary of State at the Department for International Development, has said it's not working as well as it could. He's not point blank said Britain should be giving far less away or even nothing away in foreign aid, but there are those who feel that's what's needed. £12 billion is what we hand out to foreign countries as part of our foreign aid budget. There are those who think it's a very good idea. Increased soft power makes the world a safer place. There are others who think it makes us a bit of a mug nationally. Paul says, great idea of Rory Stewart's to give funds direct to the country. That way, more poor dictators will be able to have their own private jets, maybe one for their wives too. Dave says, no more aid. We're spending it on hotels to aid these so-called migrants. Tom says foreign aid has been described as money taken from poor people in rich countries to give to rich people in poor countries. I'd simply redefine it as money taken from honest poor people in rich countries to give to corrupt rich people in poor countries. We should cut it now. Some strong opinions. Keep them coming in. It's not just pubs in trouble. If you treated yourself to some fish and chips over the weekend, you might have noticed a significant price hike. The soaring price of cod, sunflower oil and energy has left many local chip shops struggling for survival. The National Federation of Fish Fryers warning that our chippy could soon be a thing of the past. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody reports.
A British bank holiday weekend. Fish and chips, salt and vinegar, mushy peas, curry sauce. Our chippy teas are as British as Yorkshire pudding.
It's always been a thing. When you go to the seaside, you have your rock, you have your fish and chips, you can hear the seagulls.
Yeah, but it was always better in newspaper. Years ago, when I was growing up, it was a poor man's meal. Now, just bought 2 lots of fish and chips, 23 quid.
But why is our erstwhile national dish now so expensive?
The fish prices have gone up extortionately. The oil prices have gone up extortionately, and everything across the whole spectrum that we sell have gone up extortionately. So we're finding it a struggle to keep our prices reasonable and competitive.
I mean, it's all right for me to go in there and get one portion for myself, but that was £11 just for one person.
That's a lot of money, isn't it?
So can you imagine, you know, you've got a group of 5 or 6, that's probably more expensive than going to a restaurant.
The National Federation of Fish Fryers believes the industry could be on the verge of extinction. They've been pressing for help from the government.
At the moment, we've got VAT at 20%. I think that needs reducing down to 5% at the most, just like during the COVID pandemic. Other than that, we need a long-term strategy for hospitality. I think there needs to be a plan that sees beyond any leadership elections or general elections, something that will take us a view to 10 years in the future, so we can build a strong hospitality sector. It's not just fish and chips, it's the entire sector.
Next week, a new Prime Minister takes the helm in Westminster with the biggest inbox ever seen in peacetime. Add to that list, saving the humble chippy. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Best enjoyed fish and chips with a steaming hot mug of hot tea, surely. Well, according to a new study, drinking 2 or more cups of black tea a day, is better for you than having just the one. People who enjoy 2 or more cups per day were found to have a lower risk of an early death when compared with non-tea drinkers. Reported that we Brits drink 100 million brews per day. Unadulterated good news story, I think you'll agree. The managing director of trading, Tregothnan Tea, I think Director of Trading at Tregothnan Tea, Jonathan Jones joins me now. Jonathan, welcome to you. We knew this all along, did we not? It's terribly good for your health, tea.
This is great news for the tea industry, but I mean, tea drinkers all over the UK won't be surprised to hear that science is finally catching up with the world's #1 drink. You know, we're a nation of tea drinkers. It is still #1 in the world, and I was getting calls from dawn this morning from Guardian readers or Oxford graduates saying, have you seen what's been published today? That, you know, tea is actually good for us, and it's science is finally proving that's true. But there's actually, if you dig a bit deeper, there's been loads of research over the past few years into what tea does for us as Brits. You know, there's books written about how it started the Industrial Revolution, and it's great to see British-grown crops. And, you know, the tea at Tregothnan is the first in the UK, and it's now Europe's largest tea gardens. And a bit of science to back up why it's good for you is good. But look at British farmers generally. The produce in this country is generally fantastic, whether it's herbal tea, real tea, vegetables. So it's really good that we see a bit of scientific backup to what we know is good for us. And I'm down in St Ives in a fantastic gift shop on the front drinking Tregothnan Iced Earl Grey. And you know, it just tastes good, but also it's good for us. So it makes us feel good to be on holiday. I'm on holiday myself today, but I thought I have to take time out to speak to you guys about tea news and the fact that it's, you know, finally been proven by scientists to be a really good thing for us.
I was going to get into how the antioxidants work and all the rest of it, but I think you've summed it up so perfectly, Jonathan, and there's no point in taxing your medical knowledge further than is strictly necessary. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate you interrupting your
Antioxidants
holes.
are good for you as well.
Thanks ever so much, Jonathan. Norman Baker.
We're doing our bit, aren't we? We've had, I think, 2 cups of tea.
This is trade secrets. You don't
Is it trade secret? Yeah. Well, I think it's a very good drink. It makes the world go round.
Amen to that. Michelle Dewberry joins us to tell us what's coming up on Jubes & Co. Michelle.
New, but I've got to be honest, Colin, listening to all that, I'd rather be at home with a chippy tea and a cup of tea, all of that talk about all of that. But I won't. I'll save that for later and instead do my show. I'll tell you what I've got coming up. The Royal Mail, of course, striking again tomorrow. Do we still need the Royal Mail service? I mean, most of us don't even post letters anymore. Do you? Do we still need them? Also, my old boss, Alan Sugar, has said, and I quote, "Working from home, those that do it are lazy gits." His language, not mine. Is he right, Colin? Is it burn idleness or effectiveness? And, of course, I'll be picking up on the fish and chip stuff and the small businesses. Should the government, be doing more to help them?
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Norman Baker, final word, 30 seconds. We have a new Prime Minister come next Monday.
We do.
What should they be doing?
A lot more than should happen in the last month. But listen, I'm going to end on a happy note. I'm going to say, I'm off air. I'm going to have a pint and some fish and chips.
Oh, God bless you. You're very welcome. Norman Baker, always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thanks very much indeed. Keep your thoughts coming in. We'll try and reflect both sides of the argument about foreign aid, but it's certainly got you going. Michelle Dewberry coming up next with all the news stories that matter to you. Do stay with us here on GB News.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine afternoon for most of us. Some sunshine out there, but a lot of cloud at the same time, and a few showers in 1 or 2 spots. But for most, it's dry and it's fine because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That's where it's sitting. Tightly packed isobars, relatively speaking, further south mean that it is a blustery afternoon, especially around the English Channel coast. But that wind will break up the cloud overnight and we'll see lengthy clear spells. The showers will mostly ease away as well, but 1 or 2 could continue to arrive into eastern parts of Yorkshire, eastern parts of Lincolnshire, for example, and temperatures will fall 12 to 14 Celsius for most, but where we get some sheltered spots away from the wind inland, well, we'll see